We begin with the escalating battle between former President Trump's legal team and special counsel Jack Smith.
In a late-night filing, the judge overseeing the 2020 election interference case called for a hearing before the end of the week. At issue, that proposed protective order. The move comes after a series of tit-for-tat motions by the special counsel's office and lawyers defending Trump. Yesterday, the former president's legal team asked for a less restrictive alternative to Smith's protective order, arguing it violates Trump's First Amendment rights. The special counsel fired back, accusing Trump of attempting to try the case in the media. At least one former federal prosecutor believes that Smith's request is appropriate in this case.
What this is about is the government is trying to protect the integrity of the judicial process.
You might remember last week, federal prosecutors warned that the release of details or grand jury transcripts could have a chilling effect on witnesses, and they cited the former president's social media posts as a cause for concern. For his part, Trump has pleaded not guilty. We have team coverage of the latest in this legal tug-of-war. Joining us, NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian and NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Ken, let's start with you. So Trump's team asked the judge to narrow the scope of the government's request. What are the specific changes that they're looking for here?
Well, good morning, Joe and Savannah. The first thing to say is this is not really about Donald Trump's ability to speak about the case. He retains that ability. This is about what he and his team do with the massive amount of evidence that prosecutors are proposing to turn over in what's known as discovery. And that includes witness testimony, records that have been subpoenaed through a grand jury, all kinds of very personal and sensitive information. And in almost every case in a criminal investigation, a protective order is blanketed over that information, forbidding either side from making it public. That's just normal. That's standard. It's normally not challenged. In this case, Donald Trump and his legal team have tried to narrow the proposed protective order in a way that would let them release a lot of information, including about witnesses who testified before the grand jury and gave interviews to the special counsel. And that really worries the special counsel. And the special counsel asserts that this would essentially allow Donald Trump to try this case in the media the way they said his lawyer attempted to do over the weekend when he went on all 5 Sunday shows. And so now the judge has decided, instead of just ruling on the competing set of briefs, she's going to have a hearing about this. It remains to be seen exactly what she will do. But one thing the Trump team has done here is they've successfully bought themselves about a week of delay, which ultimately may be their strategy in this case in all things, guys.
Danny, let's bring you in here. So as Ken just mentioned, we saw his legal team on all these Sunday shows. Of course, the judge and prosecutors have been targets of Donald Trump himself online on his platform, Truth Social. And while a lot of those posts are not directly related to these arguments over the protective order, he's obviously discussing these people, calling them by name, things like that. How likely is it that that particular issue will come up at the hearing? How much we've seen from the former president online?
It definitely will. In fact, it's a central theme of the government's argument. And it's a fair argument. Look, Judge, we've had concerns about Donald Trump speaking and saying inappropriate things. And here's Exhibit A, B, and C. And it's only been about 72 hours. And so I think that's a strong argument for the government. But I also have to caution that, yes, protective orders are common. Protective orders are a good thing. You don't want Rule 6 grand jury material out there. But at the same time, consider this. The defense is having to make this decision on these documents, what should and should not be disclosed, before they even see the documents. And more than that, this is a very unique case because so much of the material is already known. When we read the indictment, a lot of us were thinking, oh, yeah, I've heard about all of this before from the January 6th committee and then arguably even back during the second impeachment. So the question becomes, just because it's a document that the government turns over, is that now something that Trump cannot reveal, even if he already had it, even if it came from him, between him, a text message? It's a much more tricky case because so much of the material has been public for literally years. And so does it suddenly become something that needs to be protected by virtue of the fact that the government had it on its flash drive when it turned it over to the defendant? So I think this is a trickier issue than people are making it out to be. But it seems that every former federal prosecutor in America disagrees.
So, I mean, Ken, even though we've had an indictment, the investigation continues. Now we have former NYPD Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik met with investigators yesterday talking about Rudy Giuliani's alleged role in efforts to overturn the election. So 2 questions here. First, how does Kerik fit into the case? And then what else have you heard about the ongoing investigations into those anonymous, or at least somewhat anonymous, unindicted co-conspirators who were mentioned in the indictment?
Before I answer that, Joe, a quick note on Danny's point. The proposed protective order does not forbid Donald Trump from making public things that are already in the public domain. Now, on Bernie Kerik, look, he was a chief investigator for Rudy Giuliani, who we believe is co-conspirator, unindicted co-conspirator number one in this election suppression indictment. And so prosecutors want to talk to him about everything he was doing to explore what we now know are bogus allegations of fraud in the 2020 election, what he told Giuliani, what Giuliani was doing. Kerik has also turned over hundreds of documents to the prosecution, and it just shows that they continue to investigate this case and potentially the roles of those unindicted co-conspirators who remain very much at risk of being charged in this case. Joe and Savannah.
Danny, let's turn now, if you don't mind, before we let you guys go, take a little gear shift here, talk about the Mar-a-Lago documents case for a minute. So totally different investigation, different indictment. In a court filing yesterday, the judge overseeing that case, that's Judge Aileen Cannon, our viewers might remember, she asked the DOJ why there is a second grand jury in D.C. that's also looking into this documents case. Again, this is the Florida one we've seen. How unusual is it to have an out-of-state grand jury continuing to investigate after indictments have happened? It's a federal indictment, but we know that we're seeing all that kind of activity happen down in Florida.
Well, it's unusual because it's such an unprecedented case, and the logic apparently is simply because the other location is a possible situs where some of the possible criminal activity occurred. And that's true. And arguably there could even be additional charges that are not duplicative of the charges in Mar-a-Lago, in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. But it is a fair question as to whether or not this investigation is going to continue and whether or not there are even going to be possible criminal charges. And I don't know exactly how that would work, except that you can imagine that there may be activities that happened in D.C. that could even be charged under the same statutes as the Mar-a-Lago documents case, but they simply happened, the events happened in D.C., and there could be events that that grand jury has discovered that we don't even know about. So it's a fair inquiry.
Ken Dilanian and Danny Cevallos, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.